Excellent. So good morning, everyone, both live and online. I'm going to make this, given that this will be the last show before Pesach, I'll try and conclude the topic of Lashon HaKodesh, the sanctity of the Hebrew language, and what exactly we mean by Lashon HaKodesh. I'll try and conclude it today, even though there's obviously quite a lot more that could or should be said. So just to summarize, up to now we've spoken about the language. We saw even halachic sources that consider the language so fundamentally kadosh that secular matters that normally shouldn't be discussed on Shabbos in Lashon HaKodesh, one might think could have been discussed on Shabbos. Things that normally could be said in the Beis HaMerchot, in the bathhouse, in the Mokum that's unclean, nonetheless perhaps shouldn't be said in Lashon HaKodesh. We saw the halachic conclusion that this isn't the case, but it gives one a sense of the halachic impact of Lashon HaKodesh. And then we saw two schools of thought as to the origins of Hebrew as Lashon HaKodesh. School of thought number one was that this is a language which is given by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, created rather than by humans, by Hashem, carrying within it the intrinsic meaning of objects and words, a language above the normal rules of development of languages. And this is what makes it Kodesh, this is what makes it something sanctified. This is one understanding of Lashon HaKodesh of Hebrew. The alternative understanding of Lashon HaKodesh is no, it's a language that develops like any other language. We see it as clearly etymologically similar to Aramaic, to Arabic. It's part of a family of Semitic languages. And what makes it Kodesh is unique features that it has. The Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim, controversially, says what makes it Kodesh is that it doesn't have language, direct language for that which is coarse and inappropriate and non-senua, non-modest. The Ramban argues with that, goes to town and says, no, it has many other aspects which are Kodesh. But interestingly, both seem to understand that in essence, it is a language amongst a family of languages, as we discussed, molded into a language of Kedusha. And we saw that even though at first glance there appears to be an enormous gap between these two schools of thought, the school of thought that sees Lashon HaKodesh as directly given by Hashem, perhaps the language used by God himself to communicate to the universe as the universe is created, and the alternative school of thought which sees it as a human language, nonetheless the outcome is similar. Because whether it's a human language or fundamentally a God-given language, it definitely is a language that was molded by HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the vehicle of Nevuah into being a language fit to carry ideas of Kedusha. And the analogy I gave to this was the development of English in the, let's say from the year 1400 to the year 1900, in which it was molded into an excellent language for literature by figures like Shakespeare, and it was molded into an excellent language for science and technical speech by the scientific revolution in the 16 and 17 and 1800s. And it went from being a language in which you couldn't convey subtle philosophical or scientific ideas. At the time, maybe only Latin or French were such languages. And so languages that was very good at that. So languages get molded into particular purposes. Lashon HaKodesh was molded by the Nevi'im, by the communication of the divine, into a language very, very suitable to carry ideas that matter to us, carry ideas of Kedusha. So it became a Lashon HaKodesh, it became a language of sanctity. These were the two schools of thought that we saw. And like so many of these sorts of Sunday morning series, I'm trying to demonstrate that the gap between the two, the gulf is not so wide. And starting with the second approach, makes it easier for those who study semantics and etymology and the history and development of languages and are convinced that Hebrew seems to be a Semitic tongue amongst a family of Semitic tongues that developed from previous Proto-Semitic tongues. If one is bothered by that historical and academic research, like in so many other areas, the Rambam and his way of thought allows us to live with this, to understand this, to be able, on the one hand, to see Lashon HaKodesh as part of the historical development of languages, and on the other hand, a language which carries within it extraordinary Kedusha. And the analogy I gave was that were a figure like Avraham Avinu to have arisen in Central America, you can speculate whether such a thing could have been possible. If it hadn't been possible, then maybe Aztec or Inca languages would have been developed by the prophets, by the Nevi'im, into languages of Kedusha. So this is what we discussed so far. I want to use the remaining time available to talk about Hebrew letters and Hebrew words themselves. What Torah can we draw out from these words? And I'm going to argue again that this is irrespective of the sort of hashkafic approach one takes, as in our discussion in the previous shiurim about the origins of Lashon HaKodesh. We need not worry about origins. We need to look now what Lashon HaKodesh is. And therefore, irrespective of the previous discussion, Lashon HaKodesh carries within it a vehicle for profound depth and insight. And I want to spend just a very, very brief amount of time discussing the letters of Lashon HaKodesh, and then try and move that into some of the way that it functions as a language. So first of all, the letters, I'll just mention as an aside, the Ramah in Reish Pei Daled says that a similar discussion about the lettering of Lashon HaKodesh as we had about the speech of Lashon HaKodesh. So in the same way as we had the discussion about speaking in Hebrew secular matters, and whether saying them in Hebrew imbues the secular matters with Kedusha content, similarly, the Ramah discusses, it's not analogous, but it's not identical, but it's somewhat analogous, whether you're allowed to write secular matters in Hebrew lettering. He brings that Yeshomim, that some say that you shouldn't write Devorim Shel Chol, matters of secular content, B'Ksav Ashuris, in the lettering of the classic lettering of the Hebrew alphabet. Now here we need to talk about alphabets and fonts and the like. So we are aware that there are several Hebrew fonts. The Sefer Torah, when you open the Sefer Torah, you see a Hebrew font that looks somewhat like printed Hebrew lettering, but it's more ornate. It has the little crowns and the tugim, and the lettering are formed in a particular shape and manner. And the printed letters that we use for Hebrew are simplified versions of that. So for example, a ches is a vav and a zayin with a little cap on top, and we simplify it to just basically a block, oblong, type printed letter. So the letters in the Sifrei Torah are certainly Kasav Ashuris, Ashurite Kasav, and in a moment we'll talk about what that font means, why that name is given to the font. But the name of that font that we use is called Katav Ashurit, the Katav, the font of Ashur, and Sifrei Torah have to be written in that font. And according to this view of the Ramah, one should not use that font for Divrei Chol. One shouldn't use it for secular matters. The printed version of Hebrew lettering, which is somewhat similar to the Sefer Torah lettering, but simplified, less clear whether that would be also a form of Kasav Ashuris, also a simplified version of Ashur font, and therefore also shouldn't be used for secular matters. And then we have fonts that we use, which we know for sure are later developments. So we have the script font that's used in nowadays as a script way of writing Hebrew. Most Israelis use that as their handwritten form of writing, and this is just a very simplified version, which certainly does not have any of the halachic status of Ksav Ashuris. And very interesting, we take it for granted in England. We sort of assume that printed and script are pretty similar fonts. When we learn to write in script, it's not that dissimilar to the printed lettering. In Hebrew, every Israeli child learns effectively two completely different looks of language, because printed Hebrew and script Hebrew is quite radically different. And that certainly is a later development. And then we have what we mistakenly called Rashi writing. So Rashi writing is yet another font used in Hebrew. It doesn't come from Rashi famously. It's more accurately called Katav Sfardi, Sephardic font. And it was developed by Sephardim from, roughly the year 1000 and on. And it was effectively a form of script. It was just another way of writing Hebrew more swiftly. It's just a simplified Hebrew font. It became known as Rashi font. Rashi certainly did not write in the script. It became known as Rashi font when the first printers wanted to print a main text in classic Hebrew lettering, and they wanted to print a commentary on the text which looked a little different, and they wanted to distinguish between the two. Now, the first commentary printed on everything was always Rashi, because Rashi and then had become the classic commentary. So as you wanted to print Chumash with a commentary, it was Chumash and Rashi. You wanted to print Gemara, it was Gemara and Rashi. And therefore, to distinguish between the two, they wrote the Gemara or the Chumash in classic Hebrew lettering, and Rashi they wrote in the font that they knew, the script font. The printers were in Italy, in Ivana and Santino and other places like that, and therefore they used the script that was floating around at the time, and that became known as Rashi script. So these scripts have no halachic interest to us. They're just simply scripts of Hebrew. But the classic halachic script is Kasav Ashuris. Now, there is another Kasav, another Hebrew font or lettering floating around, which we almost can't call a font because it's completely different. And this is known as Kasav Ivri, the ancient Hebrew lettering system that was used. You can see this Kasav Ivri, I mean, you can Google it afterwards, you can see tables of what Kasav Ivri looks like, and you can see it in some of the Israeli coins, I think, still have. I think the shekel coin that still has Kasav Ivri on it, as far as I remember. Now, the history behind this is that as far as we understand, in the first temple era, in the era of the first Beis Hamikdash, they used a completely different lettering. It's wrong to call it a font, by the way. This is not a different font. It's a completely different Hebrew alphabet, completely different shapes. I'm calling others fonts because there's a very clear relationship between a base in the Sefer Torah, a base in how we write it printed or in block, what we call block Hebrew lettering, a base in script, and a base in what we call Rashi script. They're all clearly the same letter, just simplified and changed a little bit. Kasav Ivri is completely different. There's no similarity between a base in Kasav Ivri and a base in Kasav Ashuris. So the modern day Hebrew font, the font that was used since the building of the second Beis Hamikdash and on, is known as Kasav Ashuris. It's the Ashur script. And the script that was used before that was the ancient Hebrew script, which is known as Kasav Ivri. So first Beis Hamikdash and previous to that, people used Kasav Ivri, completely different shape of Hebrew letters. I'll give you an example. So in the Samach, the letter Samach. So in Sefer Torah Hebrew, the letter Samach is a completely encircled shape. In Rashi font, the Samach is a completely encircled shape. In modern day Hebrew script, it's a completely encircled shape. So they're all the same lettering. Whereas the Samach in Kasav Ivri, in the Hebrew font, it is not an encircled shape at all. The ayin in the Sefer Torah, in Rashi font, is not an encircled shape at all. It doesn't have an island in the middle. It's not an encircled shape. In Kasav Ivri, it's a completely encircled shape. So these are completely different letterings. They're not just different fonts. They're completely different lettering. Yes. So very fascinating and interesting question. Yeah. Okay, very, very important question. So how on earth did this change occur? Now, before I say that, I just want to say a matter of history, which is even though at the beginning of the Second Temple era, the change occurred, the Kasav Ivri remained somewhat in use. It was still floating around and used on a more minor level. So like a lot of changes, it takes time for changes to occur. And the reason that we know this was the case is because when figures like the Maccabeim minted coins, they still used Kasav Ivri on these coins. And that is why Israel put some Kasav Ivri onto their coins. I think the 1 shekel coin that was produced in Israel, at least the old one, I can't remember what the current one is, a little palm or something. I think they took, I can't remember anymore, either a Bar Kochba or Maccabee era coin, and they embossed that on their 1 shekel coin. And because that had Kasav Ivri on it, they also put some Kasav Ivri on it. So Kasav Ivri remained a little bit in use all the way through to the closing era of the Second Temple. It remained somewhat in use. Sorry, Leonard, yes.
What 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Yes.
Would that have been?
Yeah, so another really, thank you, I wasn't going to mention this, but really important point. The Samaritans, our first cousins, who are the Kusim in the language of Chazal, Kuthites, or Samaritans, kept using Kasav Ivri. So their Sifrei Torah, you'll often have heard that you may have read, I think I even spoke about it, no, not in this forum, in another forum I spoke about. We did discuss it a little bit, biblical criticism, I think. Anyway, the Samaritans have their own version of Sefer Torah and so on. They're a group that broke off in the gap between the first and second Beis Hamikdash era. So they still use Kasav Ivri. And yes. Yeah, that is Kasav Ivri. So it did remain in use amongst this small breakaway sect, the Samaritans, and it remains in use amongst it's some use sort of for minting coins. We think that the reason why the Maccabeim and perhaps even Bar Kochba, I can't remember anymore, used the Kasav Ivri was it was like quaint, it was old worldy. It's a bit like going to an old a tourist town in England, an ancient town in England, where the tea shop has ye old tea shop on it and in quaint old English fonts with old-fashioned lettering. But we think that no one was really using it that much anymore by the time the Maccabeim put it on their coins, and it was just just like a quaint, it sort of connected people to their past. And when you're trying to rebuild an independent kingdom, as the Maccabean were and as Bar Kokhba was, after 400 years of being ruled by others, it's a way to connect people to the past, to use their old font. Okay, but let's get to the really important question over here, which is how on earth did this change happen, and why and how? So the truth is, we don't really know. There is a very, very important Gemara around this, in which the Gemara discusses this. And in fact, I should have given these out. Just pass these around, because I did prepare for this share handout because of something else I wanted to talk about. So Gabby, if you can just bother you just to put that out. If you look at the bottom of the page, I printed an example of the coins. These coins, okay, these coins were printed in the Bar Kokhba era. So these are Bar Kokhba coins. If you look at the bottom of the page, on the first page I have a chart. Leave the chart, we'll come to that. In fact, for those online, I'll just let me just share my screen, and you can see this a little bit. I'll just put this up. I'll just put this up for 1 minute, just so you can see this. Yeah, can someone just wave their hand, David? I can see you on the screen. Can you just give me a wave if you can see the screen now? So if you look at the bottom where my cursor is, you can just see the coins and you can see the Mishnaic era. And I also put Samaritan scriptures on this, so you can see some of the ideas that we've discussed here. There's also a chart here, but ignore the chart for now, and don't worry too much about that. I think I've stopped. David, have I stopped sharing the screen now? Yeah. Okay. So that there I actually put the chart. Okay. So the Gemara discusses this, where these two sorts of languages came from, and how on earth this ever developed. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin Kaf Aleph Omid Beis and Kaf Beis Omid Aleph. The Gemara basically brings a number of views, and I'm not going to go through the whole sukkah because it's a complicated sukkah. But the Gemara records and recognizes the fact that Sifrei Torah changed, that Sifrei Torah used to be written in Ksav Ivri and eventually got written in Ksav Ashuri. It then discusses the etymology of the word Ksav Ashuri. And either Ksav Ashuri means Ashurite Ksav from Ashur, in which case Jews brought this font or this script back from Assyria, or Ksav Ashuri means, like the words Ashur means authenticated or authorized or beautiful. It's a beautiful Ksav. Ksav Ivri is quite ungainly. It's like all over the place, whereas Ksav Ashuri is quite block and quite neat. If you look in the Sefer Torah, it's quite aesthetic. It's sort of squared off lettering and neatly shaped lettering. And the Gemara brings a number of views around this. The Gemara brings a view of Mazutra, who, I'm not going to go through all the different opinions of the Gemara, but the bottom line is the Gemara understood that there was some form of either prophetic license or even Lashon HaKodesh tradition that said that Jews would be allowed to change their font at some point in history. That's one path in the Gemara. So path A in the Gemara is that indeed Jews only used Ksav Ivri, and nonetheless Sifrei Torah were allowed to be changed through the authorization of a great leader or the Nevi'im or Halach Moshe Sinai. The leader who did it was therefore seemingly Ezra, because Ezra, of course, is the one who led the Jews back to Bavel and authorized this change. So this is the view of one view in the Gemara. The second view in the Gemara is that Jews always had Ksav Ashuri, but Ksav Ashuri was preserved for matters of Kedusha, and perhaps even only preserved for elite Sifrei Torah, perhaps only the Sifrei Torah that were there in the Beis HaMikdash and used perhaps by the king and the like. But everyone else used Ksav Ivri. The basis of this might be that they didn't want to use the initial Hebrew lettering because it was considered too Kodesh for day-to-day use. Don't forget, in the first temple era, Jews were speaking Hebrew. That was their language of commerce. So if Lashon HaKodesh Ksav, if Ksav Ashuri, Sefer Torah Ksav, shouldn't be used for matters of chol, how do you live a normal life in a Jewish state using Lashon HaKodesh as your language? What do you do? How do you write letters to your friends? How do you record business transactions? How do you make documents? So the answer is, you have another font or another Ksav that you use and you adopt Ksav Ivri. Second Beis HaMikdash, they're no longer speaking Hebrew, they're speaking Aramaic and then later Greek. So now they can go back to using Ksav Ashuri for anything they're using it for, which is really only Sifrei Torah and artifacts of sanctity of Kedusha. This would also explain why when you mince a coin, you use Ksav Ivri rather than Ksav Ashuri. So basically, there are two theories to summarize this switch. Theory number one is gulp. We have to bite the bullet. We have to accept that Jews changed their font, changed their lettering, not just the font, they changed their lettering. And the lettering was originally Ivri and became Ashuri, and somehow or other there was halachic sanction for that, whether with the prophetic authority or with the authority of Ezra, or it was the halacha of Sinai, the tradition that this could occur. Model number two is that Ksav Ashuri was the one that was used originally by Jews. That was the one on the Luchas, that was the one on original Sifrei Torah, and Ksav Ivri was the one used for day-to-day commerce and normal life and activities. And in the second Beis Hamikdash, they switched to publicizing and using more Ksav Ashuri because they didn't want it lost and because they were no longer using Hebrew as the language of day-to-day life. So these are the two explanations, but just in the interest of intellectual honesty, it's worth us knowing this. This is a historical fact, as troubling as it might appear to be. There are clues. For those who are interested in this, by the way, the source to look at this, as I mentioned, is the Gemara Sanhedrin in Daf Chaf Aleph. Have a look there. If you want to see a commentary that also summarizes the different stance and tries to make sense of all of this, the Ritva on the Gemara has a piece on this, and it's fairly accessible if you're interested in having a look at it. The Gemara is available online and Safaria for those who want to have a look at it. It's a very, very interesting topic. There is a little bit of a clue as to lingering confusion around this matter. Because of the following medrash, which I think Avram alluded to. There is a medrash that says that the luchos were etched all the way through. And we've discussed this before. The pasuk really says they can be read on either side. Choros and luchos. The luchos were etched all the way through. Now there is a problem because there are some letters which can't be etched all the way through, or you would be left with an island of stone in the middle. So the letter samach, or the final mem, which are encircle the shape. How do you have the stone standing in the middle if it's etched all the way through? You can etch an aleph all the way through and you have no structural problem with etching into stone. If you carve all the way through the letter mem, the final mem, or the letter samach, you have an island in the middle. How's that maintained? So the Medrash answers this happened miraculously. Now, which letters were miraculously suspended? Was the stone miraculously suspended? So in the Rashi that I think you cited this, yeah? The Rashi that Avram cited, and it's really based on the Medrash, is that it's the letter final mem and the letter samach. In which case, Rashi is understanding, based on these sources in Chazal, that the luchos were done in Ksav Ashuri. The Talmud Yerushalmi says it's the letter ayin which was miraculously suspended. Now, in our lettering, ayin doesn't need to be miraculously suspended. Ayin looks like that. It's not a letter that has a circle. So no one understands what this Yerushalmi means. Now, in Ksav Ivri, in the Ivri font, or not font, lettering, the ayin is completely encircled. So there you have an example of lettering which was an example of the Talmud Yerushalmi, who seems to understand that the font used on the luchos was Ksav Ivri, because the letter that was suspended, fully encircled, is the ayin, not the samach or the mem. So this remains a mystery. This is not an area where on a Sunday morning, having only had one cup of perhaps even decaffeinated coffee, I'm able to resolve. This remains one of the mysteries of Jewish history. I'll also point out, by the way, just as a concluding thought on this, in a moment we're going to look at I hope we have time for this, we're going to look at the meaning of letters and the fact that in Hebrew, each letter has a meaning. Now, the shapes of the letters that we use in Ksav Ashuri do not always match the meaning of the letter, whereas the shape of the letters in Ksav Ivri better matches the meaning. So, for example, ayin. So ayin is, I'll maybe say as a moment of introduction. All in English, letters, the names of letters have no meaning, right? The fact that the letter C is called C has nothing to do with seeing or sight or anything like that. And the fact that the letter B is called B has nothing to do with bees or whatever it is, or tea has nothing to do with cups of tea that we might be drinking. There's no link. There's no link because English is, number one, an evolved language which stole words from all sorts of other tongues, and B, the lettering we use in English is of Latin origin, and English has many non-Latin words, and Latin itself is an evolution of originally Semitic font. So A, B, C, and so on, coming from the Greek alpha, beta, gamma, and aleph, base, gimel. So it's not, you wouldn't expect the lettering to have any meaning or to link in any way to the language. In Hebrew, the letters all have meaning. Now, we don't know the meaning of every one of the letters. For sure, there's speculation around some letters, but some letters are very clear meaning, and ayin is an example of that. An ayin means an eye. Now, in Ksav Ashuris font, there is no relationship between an eye and the shape of the modern day ayin that we use in our Sifrei Torah, the Ksav Ashuris ayin. In Ksav Ivri, it's an oval, a horizontal oval. It looks like the shape of an eye. As I mentioned, it's a circular encircling letter. So many of the letters actually have a meaning in Ksav Ivri, which they don't have in Ksav Ashuris, the visual appearance of the letter matches the meaning behind it. There are other letters, by the way, in which this isn't the case. So, for example, Zayin. So the letter Zayin, it probably means something to do with cutting and fighting. Kli Zon is a Kli Zayin, by the way, in Hebrew to this day is a weapon. Zon is livelihood and panosa and sustenance. In many languages, including Hebrew, sustenance and war are linked in the meaning. So milchama is a war, and lachem is bread. Milchama. So there's a war is primarily the primary drive of warfare is nutrition and sustenance. That's what causes tension and so on. So the letter Zion, if you think about the letter Zion, the way it looks in the Sefer Torah, it has a little box on top, and then it has this sort of sword shape appearance below it. That's literally how it's done in the Sefer Torah. So there are letters where in Ksav Ashuris the appearance is very similar to the meaning of the word, and the letters where the words, letters in Hebrew, where the meaning of the letter only seems to fit in Ksav Ivri, not in Ksav Ashuris. I'm not going to belabor the point other than to say one of the mysteries of Jewish history, and we'll file it away under that. One day I want to give a series, actually. I've got about 30 prepared shiurim on mysteries of, I'll come to that in a moment. I'll come to all the meanings of the words, absolutely, yeah. I have a series of 30 shiurim called Mysteries of Jewish History. Maybe one day I'll get a chance to give these. This is one of the mysteries of Jewish history. We don't really know. It's lost in the midst of time. It's one of these things that Gemara would say, Teku, maybe it's Hashem, one day Eliyahu Hanavi will come and reveal to us the answers to these questions. So this is the Hebrew lettering. What I want to do is put this on the side and just spend a little bit of time talking about Hebrew letters and meanings of words, because here we come to something absolutely fascinating. In fact, for those online, I'm going to share my screen again because I want you to see this. And for those who are not online but are here, I've given out a source sheet that addresses this. In fact, I'm just going to put that up, sorry. And I will show you this. Okay, so whatever the origins of the Hebrew language, the font that we use in Hebrew, and whether Lashon HaKodesh is or isn't, as we discussed in the beginning, a language which was created as a holy tongue or became a holy tongue, the fact is it's an incredible and amazing, wonderful language which has enormous profundity to it. And this is something that was discussed through the era of the Rishonim, but never completely focused on until quite late in Jewish history. And the real groundbreaking analysis around this was done by Reb Shimshon Hirsch. There are allusions to these ideas in the thinking of Rashi. There's allusions to these ideas in the Zohar and other sources, but it was never completely worked out as a sort of methodology of thought until the time of Reb Shimshon Hirsch, and then was developed by his students, including Rav Munk, the cousin of the monk, Rav Munk of monks, Rav Eli Munk from Paris, who wrote a beautiful, almost dictionary based on this. And Rav Hirsch noted that Hebrew, as we well know, consists of basically three-letter roots. As an aside, that itself was somewhat of a machlokes Rishonim, but the conclusion after a lot of grammatical work is that basically most Hebrew words have three-letter roots. Each of these three-letter roots are constructed from three pieces, three letters, and each letter has a meaning to it. And here we come to a truly wonderful idea, because 2 points. One is, if we can understand the meaning of each letter, perhaps we can understand the meaning of words. So if you know the meaning of each letter, maybe words are constructed from the meaning of each letter. So like bricks in a building or pieces in a puzzle. If you have three letters, each letter carries a meaning, then the three-letter roots will be formed by the merging of these three letters. Point number one. Point number two, this would lead us to expect that there were links between similar roots. So in English, we don't expect that bed and bid and bide and bad and body and buddy should have similar etymologies or similar meanings. There's no connection between bidding and bed and bide and and body and bid, and these are all separate words. And we know that again because they come. One word might be a Saxon word, and another one a Latin word, another one of Celtic origin, another one Viking, another one German. We don't expect English to work like that. In Lashon HaKodesh, we would expect there to be a link between these words. And again, in the interest of historical accuracy, again, I want to emphasize, this was something that took those that study language millennia to think about. As great a figure as Golem, for example, seems not to have had, even the Rambam, by the way, in Moed Nevuchim, seems not to have had the assumption that words of similar roots have to mean the same thing in Lashon HaKodesh. Rashi was very groundbreaking in this. Us Ashkenazim often criticize Rashi's grammar. In popular grammar, we don't use Rashi's grammatical system. When you learn Rashi al Torah, we use actually the Sfardi grammatical system. But in this point of the commonality of shared roots, actually Rashi was a very important figure in this. And this was really developed by Shimshon Vahash. So let me just try and use the time available to talk about a little bit about this. The first thing is I'm going to go through some of the Aleph base and just discuss what the letter means and how it works. Now, because we're short of time, I'm going to pick the lower hanging fruit. In other words, I'm going to pick the easy examples of this rather than the more difficult examples of this, because we don't know everything there is to know about this. But let's just take some examples. So we have the letter Aleph. Now, the letter Aleph in Hebrew means something. It means Aleph, master, or duke. Aleph, we know the Alephim. It means a leader. It's the first letter. It's the leader of all letters. It also means it has a grammatical function. When you put an Aleph at the beginning of the words, it means I. Now, all thought and all consciousness and all interaction starts with I, starts with me. It's not an egoistical statement. It's a statement of fact that when there's a me here who's conscious and able to know myself and reflect upon myself, then I can begin interacting with objects around me or subjects around me or other people, but everything has to start with myself. Even, the demands of the Torah that we transcend ourselves says, you should love your neighbor as yourself, but there has to be a self there. A true consciousness emerges in a little child, perhaps as early as a few days of existence. The child can't begin forming any sense of the world within which we live. So everything has to start with I. So the I is the leader, the Aleph, the duke, it's not a coronated leader, it's not a melech. A duke is an Aleph is more like a president, or modern Hebrew it's a general. It's a leader, not as an appointed leader, but just a sense of primacy. The letter Aleph at the beginning of the word means I. And also, by the way, is the first, it's the vehicle of all sound. Every sound has to have a hidden Aleph behind it in order to make sound. The next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is when I begin interacting with another. It's the second letter, seconds. There's two of us now. The letter is bait, bayit, base. It means a house. It even looks like a house, by the way. You can go into the letter. So the literal meaning of the letter is bayis, is house, and its grammatical function at the beginning of words is, when you have a bait at the beginning of words, it means either in or with. So if I want to put something inside something else, I'd say I put it something else. I put it beit knesset, biyadi, whatever it is, in my hand. So beit means, bayis means in, because a house is the vehicle through which I allow others into my space. There's me, there's the Aleph, and then there's the house that I begin forming, into which I allow others into my space, and therefore grammatically it functions as that. By the way, fatherhood, for example, is Av. There's I, and then there's the second, the bias that I begin creating, and so on and so forth. I'm going to skip, just because in the interest of time, I'm going to use the low-hanging fruit, those that are easy and intuitive to understand. Another very famous example of this is the Vav. A Vav means and. That's the grammatical function of the Vav, but the word Vav means a hook. You can see that in the shape of the letter, right? Here, Ksav shows it works. The shape of the letter, the Vav, is quite literally a hook. That's the shape of the Vav, and acts as a hooking word. And if I want to do this and that, I want to hook two things together. So grammatically, a Vav at the beginning of the word means and. By the way, Vav has other less well-known connecting functions in grammar. So, for example, those of you who remember your classical Hebrew will remember the Vav HaHibuch, right? The Vav that shifts in Hebrew the past to the future and the future to the past. So very, very interesting. In Hebrew, Vav at the beginning of a verb has a function of shifting the past to the future and the future to the past. It's a connecting word again. There's two forms of past tense in Hebrew. There's a past tense which is past. There's a future tense, which is future, and then there's a future tense, which is a future emerging from the past, or a past tense, which is a past leading to a future. In that case, you use the wrong tense form, and you add a vov, to convert the tense into the opposite direction. So again, it's a vov acting as a connection between the past and the future. I'll take 4 or 5 more examples just to try and demonstrate this. Another easy one is the letter kaf. So kaf means, a kaf is a palm or a spoon in Hebrew. The shape is exactly what you would expect from a palm or a spoon. It's a type of holding thing. It's to take something in your palm or to take something in the spoon. A kaf, this is a really interesting one. A kaf is used in Hebrew. The meaning of the word grammatically, when you put a kaf at the beginning of words, is like. So if I want to say something is like something else, I'll say it's ka, like that. Right? Love your neighbor, like yourself, kaf. Now, the reason why it's like that is because whenever I do a comparison, a like, it's a way of grabbing hold of something. If you don't understand a concept, and you say to me, you're a foreigner, and you say, what's the word stool? And I say, it's like a chair. I'm taking something you do understand, that you can grasp, and I'm giving you a handle or a way of holding onto it for something that you don't understand. That's what all comparisons are. We use comparisons to help us take hold of things which we otherwise couldn't understand. So there's re'acha, there's the other. I struggle to understand what the other is. I don't really know what your consciousness is like. I don't really know what I even struggle really to understand the existence of someone else. So the Torah says, like you, I understand my own existence, extrapolate. This is the basic rules of empathy. What I feel is probably somewhat analogous to what you feel. So kaf is always used as a way of taking hold of things, as a way of grasping things. I'll just do, actually, in the interest of time, because we're running out of time, just one more example of this, which is the letter lamed. The letter lamed is an interesting one because it's a composite letter. If you look at the Sefer Torah, lamed is constructed from a kaf and a vov. That's how it's written. It's the kaf, and on top of that, it's the vov. Now, lamed means lomed, to learn. I'm a teacher. In teacher training, there's this to this day, this is what's said. The essence of teaching, lomed, to learn, is 2 things. It's comparisons, as we just explained, analogies, and linking. A learned person is someone who can link. Actually, one of the best definitions of intelligence also is the ability to link disparate ideas, is to make links between all sorts of different ideas and therefore build systems. So the word lomed, means to learn. The letter lamed means to learn. The shape of the lamed is combined with a kaf, comparisons, and a vov, links. That's what learning is. Learning is making comparisons and making links. Also, the lamed is the only letter that reaches above the line. Right? It's a letter that goes above the line in Hebrew. In English, we have lots of letters like that, like B and D, they all go above the line. In Lashon HaKodesh, the only letter that does this is lamed, which is what we would want learning to be. It's raising yourself, it's elevating yourself. Learning is reaching towards something else, trying to right. The word lamed at the beginning of a letter in grammar means to. When it goes to something, you learn about it and you reach towards it and you strain towards it. So these are just some examples of the letters. Each of the letters have a fundamental meaning in which there's an alignment between sometimes the shape of the letter, sometimes not. In Ksav Ashuri, the meaning of the letter as if it was a word, the meaning of the letter as a grammatical addition, a prefix or a suffix to a letter, and in a moment we'll see a brick in building 3-letter roots. I could have added, by the way, I didn't go into this, but for example, a kaf at the end of a word makes it into yours, the possessive. How do we hold things? We hold them in our hands. We grasp hold of them in our kaf. So if I want to say something belongs to you, I add a kaf at the end of the word. So Beit is a house, Beitcha is your house, and so on and so forth. So the kaf at the end of the word makes it into yours. So that's how you hold things. So this is a vast area of study. There's still much we don't know around this, but this was particularly sort of re-brought to the world's attention, as I mentioned, by Shimshon Hirsch. Now, on the sheets I've given out, I've shared, and on the sheets that I'll put on the screen. So David, just can you give me a nod if you can see the screen? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so on these sheets, I've put word families. And this is drawn or stolen or plagiarized, but I don't want to be plagiarized, so I'll give the credit straight away, from the very beautiful dictionary that Rabbi Eli Munk, I mentioned before, put together based on Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch's theories. So Shimon Shmuel wrote a commentary on the Torah. He never did this systematically, but figures like any monk have drawn out the sort of dictionary, as it were, that you can make from this. Just in the interest of starting, I will mention one more letter in this conversation, and this is the letter Tov. Tov is the last of the letters. Tov has a meaning, by the way. We know that Tov comes several times in Tov. Tov means a mark. So, for example, in Yechezkel, Perek Tes Pasuk Daled, it says that there's a Tov, a letter, a mark is put on someone's forehead. The Medrash says that when Cain was marked with a letter, it was the letter Tov. Tov means a mark or a sign or a label, how I identify something. Tov is also the last letter. It means a seal or a conclusion or an identification or making something specific. That's what the word Tov means. The reason it's the last letter is because it's the conclusion. We say in English A to Z. So in Hebrew, you'd say Aleph to Tov. We start off with the Aleph and we conclude with the Tov, the fullest extent of reaching out to the conclusion and the end, and that which labels and specifies everything. When we go through life, we try and label things and specify things. And I connect with something because of there's a me and there's a you. And there's a link between the two of us because I have a label for you. I have a story about you. I have a mark and a specification for you. You mean something to me as an individual, or as So there may be someone who I meet who I have nothing about, and I make quick assessments about them. I look at how they're dressed and how they're behaving, and I label them as something. This is a particular type of individual, or there's someone who I know personally, and I have a genuine connection to them. So this is the letter Tov. Tov, by the way, as a prefix in Hebrew means you, right? So there's me and there's you. That's the A to Z of all existence. Combined with another letter, and this is the first on the top left of your chart that I've put on the screen and things, we have the Aleph Tov as a word family. So when Aleph is combined with Tov, it means At or Ata, you. That's the literal meaning of Aleph Tov. If I say you, I mean there's me, Aleph, I'm the Duke, I'm the leader, I'm the king. Everything starts with me. Apologies, but that's how I see the world. That's how we all see the world, only through ourselves. And then there's you, there's the Tov, the specific person opposite me. Ossa, by the way, is a less common Hebrew word. It's more used in Aramaic to approach or to journalist something. Ois is a sign, and Ata is you. The word es, by the way, again, is some very unclear words in Hebrew. Gracious word, it es Hashemayim. Sorry, it's from the first pasuk that we read. We don't have to translate the words et, but what it does mean is it's a prefix. It's an introductory word used to link an object, which is the object of something I'm talking about. Es will only ever be used in that context. So in the beginning, Hashem created. Es Hashemayim, the heavens. So in English, we don't have an equivalent word for it, but it means the same idea as up to you. There's me, there's the object, and the linking word is es. We just aren't able to translate it to English because we don't have an equivalent subject in English. So this is one word family that I put over here. I'll look at another very, very famous one on the top right. This is the base Reish family. Again, I'm picking low-hanging fruits here just for the purpose of simplicity. It's in some of the very famous ones. I think I've spoken about the base Reish family before. Base Reish is very interesting because base, of course, is the second letter. It's the letter of multiplication. We start off with I, with the Aleph, and then you have the second letter, base. We said base is bayit, the house. It's the thing that things are put into. Reish is an interesting letter because certainly if you go with the gematria system, Reish is the second in the hundreds category. So you have Kuf, which is the first in the you have Aleph, which is the first in the units category. You have Kaf, which is the first in the tens category, and you have Reish, which is the first in the hundreds category. By the way, Kaf makes sense that it's the first in the tens category because Kaf again is a holding word. A Kaf is similar to a base, by the way. It looks a bit like a base. It doesn't have the tail. It's not the house, but it's a Kaf. It's a palm or a spoon with which I hold more personal things. It's the beginning of my multiplication. There's the individual multiplication, which is Aleph Bet, and there's the sort of tens multiplication, the communal multiplication, which is the Kaf, and then you have the hundreds multiplication. So if you look at, and I've just ordered this in the base Reish form, you see in the top right of the page, you see how base Reish is everything about going out. So you have, for example, bar, which means a son. In Aramaic, it means that, and even in Hebrew on rare occasions, you have bara, to create. This is the ultimate act of going out from yourself, base Reish Aleph. You have a boreg, which is a drill to dig deep into something, to penetrate or pierce something. You have borod, hail, which which pounds down on things. You have bora, which means to pierce. You have beres, which is attack, the flow. You have borach, to flee when you're going away from yourself, or running away from something. You have beirach, which is a knee, which we use. You have bracha, which is to bless, to go beyond yourself, and brecha, pool. We'll come to those two in a moment. You have barak, which is lightning. You have bora, which is to sort out and to separate. So you have this idea of a oneness separating and going out of itself and piercing something else, and this sort of flow outwards, which is the base resh family. I'll just talk for a moment about, this is what I spoke about the base resh family before, because I've spoken about the concept of a bracha. So the word bracha, to bless, is etymologically, is not just etymologically, the concept of a blessing is a different idea. But it seems that the meaning of bless is to wish someone that they should have an overflow. They should flow out of themselves. They should overflow. And the Rishonim already stressed this link to the word brecha, which in modern Hebrew means a pool. In classical Hebrew, it was a particular type of pool. When you have a spring, which you can still see this in Israel to this day, you have springs which come out of the ground, and around them is a pool which gathers the water. So that's what brecha meant. So it's the overflow pool, the pool which gathers things in. So bracha is saying that your life should overflow. You should overflow with health and happiness and wealth and prosperity and goodness and family and everything else that we would wish people to overflow with. So this is a very classic example of families. Bracha is an interesting one because it combines all the twos. It's the base, the resh, and the kaf. So it's the combination, and that's the word that most means, the sort of overflow ability. We're running out of time, so I'll just give one more example of this. But have a look at the sheets online. For those of you who are watching online, you can keep the sheets I've given out as printed, and maybe on the YouTube clip I'll put a link. If you click on the description, I'll put a link to the sheets that other people can see this. But I'll look at one more example again. I'll just pick a low-hanging fruit because this is an easy example. In fact, I will pick fruit as my low-hanging fruit, and we'll look at on page on the middle of the second page. On the printed sheets, I think it's labeled page 4, but on the handout sheets, I think it's labeled page 2. The pei resh root, which seems to mean that which breaks out. And again, just look at the family of words. This is actually a very clear family, so it's a very nice one to have a look at. You have pei resh aleph, pera, wild, like you remember pera Odom with Yishmael. Then we have pereg, which is scattered seeds. In modern Hebrew, we use this for poppy seeds. It means scattered seeds. We have pered, to separate. Para, a cow, and multiply, puru, to multiply. Poras, you know this from your Purim halachas. There's poras is an open city which isn't surrounded. Perach is to flour. A flour is a perach. Prat is a detail when you break things into their component parts. Pri, of course, is a fruit. Perach is to break. Foram is to tear off. Paras is a slice. Pora is to grow wild. Poratz is to breach. Perek is to break apart. Lefarek, if you break something apart. The reason we call in Hebrew a chapter is because it's a perek, it's a section. To section something into pieces is lefarek. Poratz is, I've said, is to breach already. Piro is a crumb. Purim is crumbs. And porash is to spread out, to analyze, to fall off, dung, that which separates off. The reason we call commentaries is because they separate off, they sort of spread out. Lifros is to spread something, to spread a sheet. A perish is porash is that which separates. Dung is called perish in Hebrew, that which separates off from the animal, and so on and so forth. So what to conclude, given that we have run out of time, this will be our last year before Pesach, have a look at the sheets. This is a very, very beautiful system. Some are very convincing, some seem a little more forced. Make up your own minds about this, but it's definitely is enough that it is highly convincing as a system. Whether we can explain every word like this or not, you'll come to your own conclusions, but certainly it's a fascinating piece of insight, and it's a beautiful system. Again, we cannot do this the whole time. I don't want to make false claims here, but so often it's revealing about and uncovers a depth of Torah. Maybe I'll just give one other example of this. There are many words in Hebrew for beauty, yafeh and naim and so on and so forth. Sometimes understanding this system can be used to help us understand the exact meaning of words. So for example, we have the word oriv. Oriv means pleasant. We don't that Hashem should make our Torah learning oriv. So there's another word for beauty in Hebrew. What exactly is the sense of this beauty? So we have the ayin resh root. In fact, we have words very similar to oriv. We have erev. Erev means evening. Orev means beautiful. La'arov means to mix, and this is already the beginning of the key of the word. The roots of the word orev, erev, means that which is mixed and blended. La'arov means to a taruvat. If you learn your hilchas pasabachalov, your laws of kashrut, a taruvat is a mixture. La'arev means to mix, to blend. In weaving, there's the shesi and the erev. There's the interwoven threads are called orev, or called erev, that are interwoven. So orev means blending. Evening time is a blended time. It's not lila, which is night. It's not yom, which is day. It's dusk. Dusk is when light and dark are mixed, and shapes are blended and unclear. You can't see the outlines of things clearly. So orev, as a meaning for that which is pleasant or beautiful, seems to me when something is blended nicely, when there's a harmony, when disparate elements are sort of blended and merge in a nice form. So if we were to understand Psukim properly, we would understand why the Torah uses the word orev for some types of beauty, and yafeh for other types of beauty, and na'im for other types. Orev is when it's la'arov, when it's mixed, when it's blended well. Orev is evening, and so on and so forth. So we'll stop there. We've run out of time, but just to say that please keep these sheets and have a look at this. If you're interested in further exploring this, Rabbi Eli Munk, as I said, has a book called 7 Days of Creation. He argues very briefly in this book that, I'm sorry, I'm going on about this because it's so fascinating, but I'll just finish with this last thought. He argues in the book that in the 7 days of creation, we have to understand the meaning of words in their proto-meaning, their intrinsic meaning, rather than how they are currently used. And that's the only way we can understand the 7 days of creation, because things haven't yet formed. That's why he does his dictionary at the back of the book. Now, let me give you one example of this. At the beginning of Bereshit, it says there's mayim. Now, mayim we translate in modern Hebrew as water. However, the etymology of mayim, he argues, is that which is formless and shapeless. And therefore, when the Torah says it doesn't mean water H2O. It means that which is formless. Liquid, mayim is the best example we have in modern day life of that which is completely formless. It has no shape unless we put it in a cup. It's transparent, it has nothing formed, and we have to give it a form and a shape. But when the Torah says that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of God, was hovering over Pnei Hamayim, it means over formless. The material, the matter of the universe was originally material, and then it coalesced into objects and shapes. So he says if we analyze the meaning of words, we can understand things. He says in many languages, the word mayim, or water, is linked to this lack of, to a formlessness. So in Hebrew, mayim is ma. Mayim, by the way, seems to be a word that behaves like a plural word normally. It's only in the im form, and yet the singular, it's ma. It's whatness. It's all that which is whatness, which is unclear and so on. Mayim in English, for example, we have what and water. In Germanic languages, you have was and Wasser. There's this link between. There's languages where in French, sorry. Oh, and oo means where or what, and you have an aqua and qua in the Latin languages, what and water. So in many languages, water means that which is what, that which is vast, that which is it was unclear. The word Shamayim, Bereshit bara Elokim es Shamayim v'es haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What's the heavens? What's the earth? So Shamayim is part of a family of words, which I think I printed on my sheet. Yes, I did the Shom word. Shom means that which is over there. You have a name that we give to things. We spoke about labeling before. The names that we give to things is that which is over there. Shamayim means to remove from location. Have a look at the bottom right on the second page. I think I printed all the Shom words. So the translation of Shamayim it's a combination word like Michnasayim and Misparayim and so on. Shamayim, the word for heaven, means everything which is over there, everything which is beyond, nothing which is here. It's a very good word for the heavens. It's a very good word for the heavens or the sky. It's called that which is over there. The sky is always beyond us. Always beyond. So when I say something is shom, when I say something is over there, I mean it's beyond. So we refer to the skies as shamayim, but what we really mean is Bereshit bara Elokim es Shamayim v'es haaretz means God created that which is here, oretz. I'm not going into the etymology of oretz now, and He created shamayim, that which is transcendent, that which is beyond, that which is over there, that which isn't here. We live in a universe which is two parts. There's the here and there's the transcendent within us. So Bereshit bara Elokim es Shamayim v'es haaretz should be translated in the beginning God created the here, the physical, and also shamayim, that which is transcendent, that which is beyond. We talk about having yirat shamayim, someone who's God-fearing. He has yirat shamayim, fears heaven. were you scared of the sky falling down? Why do we say someone fears heaven? We say Hashem is in heaven. Hashem has no place. He's not a physical being. He's there in the skies. Yirat Shamayim means fear or awe of the transcendent. I don't want to lose that which is transcendent in me. I live with an awareness. I don't want to become so materialistic and selfish and greedy and lazy and egoistical and arrogant that I forget the Shamayim. I forget that which is transcendent. So Yirat Shamayim means I live in awe of that which is transcendent. God is in the Shamayim means he's beyond. He transcends existence. So it's another example of how we need to understand what words mean. We've shifted the word Shamayim to mean the skies, the heavens, because that which is transcends and beyond. I'll just finish with one of my favorite stories, apropos of almost nothing, which is that who the first man in space was called? Russian cosmonaut Uri Gagarin. So when Uri Gagarin came back from space, he was reported as saying, I went to the heavens and there was no God there. He was a representative of the very secular communist period, from which I learned that not all cosmonauts are good theologians. Fine, that was one of my favorite stories till I read that with the fall of the Iron Curtain, it was discovered that Uri Gagarin was secretly a religious man who was actually a practicing Christian, which he didn't make clear in his public life, because he didn't do that in communist Russia, and he never said this. This was put out by some Pravda propagandist journalist, from which I learned that not all journalists are good theologians, but Uri Gagarin never said this. This is a piece of Russian propaganda. But be that as it may, we know that from his diaries, by the way. They found his diaries and printed them. So be that as it may, it's a good way of mockery. If you're a communist official, it's a good way of making fun of belief. I went to the skies and no God there. But when we say Hashem is in Shamayim, we mean he transcends. He's transcendent. Shom, he's over there, not over here. So knowing the meaning of words, the core meaning of words is, as Rav Hash pointed out, quite an important endeavor when we are learning Chumash and part of the beauty of Lashon HaKodesh. I will stop there because I've gone over my time. I apologize to those who are live and online, and I will put on the YouTube clip. I'll put the link also to this document. And I'll see everyone again after Pesach. Sorry, yes, Leonard. Yeah. Adam, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, everyone.